Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. James 1, 2-8.
Consider it pure joy. Some have undergone a series of trials of many kinds for an extended period of time with no end in sight. No matter which street you seem to walk down, trials appear at every corner, placing you under constant surveillance and monitoring every move you make. Trials sometimes disguise themselves as sick parents, quarreling friends, relatives with terminal illnesses, business failures, moral failures, suicidal thoughts, and unexpected betrayals. Severe anxiety attacks sometimes surround you like alligators gathering around a capsized boat in a Louisiana swamp. Trials come in the form of war clouds gathering in the east that may demand a new round of deployments for our loved ones. Trials come in the disguise of political mud wrestling in Washington, D.C., that has put the entire nation in a bipartisan chokehold. Trials come in the form of congressional gridlock that has turned the trains of unity and civility into the stubborn locomotives of pride and arrogance that may eventually lead to a disastrous collision on the screeching tracks of chaos and disorder. In Ephesians 5, Paul called such days the evil days. These are the days wherein evil is always present, seeking to undermine goodness and love in the world. James writes to Christians that had been scattered among the nations and who were being blown about by the high-velocity winds of painful persecutions and terrifying trials. Trials of many kinds cause some to abandon their Christian faith as a survival strategy designed to enable them to avoid persecution, torture, and death. James encourages them not to give up on Christ, and he tells them that the only way to endure suffering is for them to consider it pure joy as they enter into trials of many kinds. In order to get the full impact of James's instructions here, we must consider the meaning of the word consider. The word consider means to think, to muse over, to observe, to give attention to look at, and to evaluate a situation. The world has developed all kinds of entertainments and amusements to keep us from musing over the trials that come up against us. The world provides all sorts of ways to escape reality, but James encourages us not to run from the reality of trials and problems, but to enter into them straightforwardly, with the courage to think upon them and to look at them with a Christ-like attitude. The common response to trials and problems and difficulties is to ignore them and to pretend as if they are not happening. James understands the importance of slowing down to pay attention to the trials we're going through in order to understand the purpose of our suffering. We must use the full extent of our mental faculties to think, to meditate, and to pray through the difficult problems that confront us in this life. When the it of life shows up in the form of many trials, many kinds, sometimes people don't want to deal with it. They try not to think about it, and they want to get out of it. They just want it to be over with. They have never seen it like this before. When James says, consider it, he reminds me of the movie that came out in 2017 called It. The movie was a horror movie about a clown terrorizing a group of kids in a small town. The only way they could defeat the terrifying clown was to come together collectively and to consider and to think and to muse on how to get rid of it. Today, there are many clowns on the loose in the forms of trials of many kinds that are terrifying and harassing towns and cities all across the nation and around the world. But it takes Christians banding together to encourage one another, to hold on through the trials of many kinds. We must realize that no man and no woman is an island unto him or herself. We need one another. This is why James tells the Christians in James chapter 5 to confess their faults one to another and to pray for one another. James does not say, consider it pure joy if trials of many kinds come. It is not a matter of if they come, but it is a matter of when they come. When trials of many kinds come against us, we must look at them with a higher way of thinking. When considering our trials of many kinds, let us use a divine logic, a divine reasoning that is superior to the corrupt logic and ungodly reasoning of a fallen world. Let us look at our trials through the eyes of God's divine wisdom. When facing trials, we normally turn to friends for advice, to mentors for guidance, to counselors for counsel, to pastors for leadership, and to spiritual directors for spiritual direction. And these are great sources of encouragement. However, James declares that the best place to turn when you face trials of many kinds is to God, who is the source of eternal wisdom. And verse 5, James says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. There are some trials in life that education cannot educate us enough to understand. There are some trials in life that information cannot inform us enough to explain them. There are some trials in life that knowledge cannot train us enough to deal with them. God's wisdom is our truest solution to the trials of many kinds. James's use of the word pure has to do with the substance that is unmixed and unmingled with any impure substance. Pure joy emerges from what James describes in chapter 3 as pure wisdom. God's pure wisdom from above can teach us how to consider it pure joy when we face our trials. Just as we should not mix joy with doubt, neither should we mix heavenly wisdom with worldly wisdom. James says in verse 8, when we mix these conflicting elements, it will make us double-minded and unstable in all that we do. He describes pure wisdom in James 3 as being that which is from heaven. It is pure, it is peace-loving, it is considerate, it is submissive, it is full of mercy and good fruit, it is impartial, and it is sincere. People who experience life with this pure wisdom are equipped with the equipment they need to consider it pure joy when they face trials of many kinds. James says there's another kind of wisdom, an impure wisdom that is a deadly contaminant to the godly wisdom. He describes this world's impure wisdom as harboring bitter envy and selfish ambition, as being boastful and in denial of the truth. But James says such wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. And he says, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder in every evil practice. Some consider life in this world as a struggle between the strong and the weak. They consider life as a jungle where only the strongest animal survives. They give very little or no consideration to the life that is to come after this life. People with such an understanding fight over material things and positions of power as if this world is their eternal place of existence. In their effort to survive in this world's jungle, they feel compelled to use the wisdom of the jungle. But our time in this world is limited. It is futile to engage in class warfare over material things, using worldly wisdom to fight over these things that we can never take with us out of this world. The wisdom of heaven reminds us that it is our common heritage in Christ where we find peace as Christian brothers and sisters. James says in my conclusion, believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, for the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. We need to remember what the writer says in Hebrews 12:2-3. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In my second conclusion, I want to encourage you to keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Don't become discouraged by the political wrangling that you hear going on in this world, because this world is not your home. Your physical body is not the true identity of who you are. The real you is the you that you could not see when you looked in the mirror this morning. There is a part of you that death cannot kill and the grave cannot hold. There is a part of you that is of Christ himself that death thought he killed on that Friday, but early that Sunday morning, he got up from the grave declaring all power in heaven and on earth in his hand. And that same Christ is alive in you today. So you got to keep your eyes fixed on him when you go through your troubles and your trials. May God bless you, and may he bless you real well.